We have a ton of conference realignment news today as talks are heating up in regards to 6 Pac-12 teams potentially joining the Big 12. But there are also reports that there can be an alliance between the Pac-12 and the ACC. Before we get to today's video, make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. If you're watching this video, odds are that you love college football, and odds are you aren't subscribed to my channel. So make sure to subscribe to one of the best college football communities here on YouTube. Also, make sure to drop a like on this video as well. It helps out with that YouTube algorithm and it helps share the video with more college football fans. Plus, it only takes a second to do. So in yesterday's video, I talked about the Pac-12 potentially sending half of their teams to the Big 12. While that is still a very likely scenario and something we'll get to later in the video, there are now reports of the Pac-12 and ACC potentially coming together. Man, I wonder where I've heard this before. Something like an alliance? John Wilner of the Mercury News broke down the potential proposal, and it doesn't sound as stupid as you would think. Instead of having the Pac-12 essentially wiped out, they could save it by forming a super conference with the ACC. The super conference would span all 4 time zones and would come at a huge discount while providing the needed inventory to fill in the remaining gaps in the ABC, ESPN, ESPN2, and ESPN Plus broadcast lineups. Despite the massive investment in the SEC and lesser investments in the ACC, the network still needs college football content for its uncovered markets, particularly those in the Mountain and the Pacific time zones, hence where the Pac-12 comes into play here. So an alliance could be formed with the ACC and the Pac-12 in order to create a bi-coastal super league that would serve as a counterweight to the SEC and to the Big Ten. Now all of a sudden you have a conference with notable names such as Clemson, Oregon, Miami, Florida State, Washington, and many other respectable programs. Now I know this conference wouldn't be on the level of the SEC and the Big Ten, but it wouldn't be a bad third option considering what the choices are right now. If you're thinking about what this means for potential travel plans, well, with the Big Ten adding 2 Los Angeles schools, that showed that travel means nothing anymore. Bob Thompson, who's the former president of the Fox Sports Networks, said to John Canzano in an interview that a potential Pac-12 partnership with the ACC would capture TV markets that include nearly 28 million households. By comparison, the Big 12 television markets have only 14 million households. So just like that, you're doubling the market. Now, why would this be considered a loose partnership and not a formal merging of the ACC and the Pac-12 into one of these so-called super conferences? Well, it gets tricky because the ACC's current grant of rights agreement runs through 2036 and it locks the conference members to ESPN. If the ACC were to open the grant of rights, it would run the risk that one or more conference members might go to the SEC or the Big Ten. And when I'm talking about conference members, I'm looking at Clemson, Florida State, and Miami. As of right now, these are just some of the rumors out there, and I don't think there's any building momentum towards what's happening. But as we saw last week, we truly have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. This scenario, though, would certainly be interesting. It would keep the Pac-12 alive without having half the conference go to the Big 12. It would also keep the ACC alive while avoiding some of their teams potentially leaving for the SEC or the Big 10. Like I mentioned, this super conference wouldn't quite be on the level of the SEC and the Big 10, but it would be a pretty good conference, I must say. Speaking of the Pac-12 losing half of their teams to the Big 12, what's the latest on that front? According to a report today from The Athletic, the league is having serious talks with 6 Pac-12 schools, the 6 teams that I mentioned yesterday. But in case you missed that video, it's Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, Utah, Washington, and Oregon. Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark, who was just hired last week, has been described as super aggressive by one source in the article, and he also has the backing of the Big 12 presidents and the chancellors to pursue the addition of Pac-12 members. It's unclear right now just how quickly the Big 12 could get a deal done on its expansion efforts, but the article expressed optimism that Yormark can pull it off. Oregon and Washington are more of a question mark as they may hold out for the possibility of joining either the Big 10 or the SEC, but the Big 12 is ready to welcome them with open arms. Here's what a Big 12 athletic director told The Athletic. Yormark talked about making sure we're going to be aggressive. We're not going to sit on our hands. I've talked to some ADs and we think we're in a position of strength. The Pac-12 is in an interesting boat right now. It seems like a lot of teams have expressed their willingness to stay in the conference, but do they truly mean that? I wouldn't be shocked to see any of them bolt for the Big 12. But then again, if this alliance with the ACC could potentially happen and they could somehow merge, that might be the better option for all the teams in the conference. Alright, so enough of Pac-12 talk. What's the latest with Notre Dame? Many people are expecting them to join the Big Ten, but it looks like that's not a foregone conclusion. It looks like there's a strong possibility that Notre Dame remains as an independent team.
Yeah, Notre Dame, according to a report over the weekend, its preference is to stay independent. The issue there is Notre Dame's preference has always been to stay independent. The Big Ten is offering $80 to $100 million in riches every year in their media rights agreement. So right now, it looks like Notre Dame's going to stand pat, and the academic piece of it, that they kind of see themselves as above everybody else in that regard. So it looks like right now, Notre Dame's going to stay. That could change. So it's really down right now to the Pac-12 and Big 12. If Notre Dame doesn't do anything, I don't know if the SEC or Big 10 expand any further right now.
Now, this would make total sense, as Notre Dame benefits from being an independent team. They get to create their own schedule, and they have their exclusive deal with NBC. Them being in the Big Ten would cause a lot of issues, and I don't think they're really in a desperate need of making that move. Regardless of whether or not all this conference realignment happens, they're still going to be scheduling all of these teams. I guess we're not done with the Pac-12, as we're going to go back over there and see what the latest news is surrounding the conference. Here's what reporter John Canzano had to say in his newsletter from today. Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado appear to be interested in what they're hearing from Pac-12 Commissioner George Kliavkoff. An AD at one of those schools told me there was no scheduled meeting with the Big 12 this week and added, "George is kicking ass." There are a number of mid-major universities that have reached out to the Pac-12 about joining the conference. Fresno State, Boise State, and SMU are among them, I'm told. Potential conference additions have to be viewed through the prism of potential television revenue. The magic number in the Pac-12 is $30 million a year. Boise State, for example, receives $4 million a year from CBS and FS1 as part of its contract with the Mountain West. If the Broncos were to join the Pac-12, it would have to be with a heavy subsidy or not as a full member. It just doesn't pencil out otherwise. It was interesting to hear that the three teams that have expressed interest are Fresno State, Boise State, and SMU. Boise State makes a lot of sense, as many people have expected them to join the Pac-12 at some point. I personally thought San Diego State would be among the teams listed, but Fresno State would also be a really solid option. It is interesting hearing SMU being one of the teams interested, but I think it would be great for the Pac-12 to get a team out there in Texas. So whatever happens with the Pac-12, I wouldn't be opposed with them adding a couple of those teams to the mix. Well, that wraps it up for all the news for today. What are your thoughts on this potential Pac-12 ACC merger? Do you think it's something that would be smart for the conferences, or do you think it's the dumbest idea you've ever heard? Whatever you think, let me know in the comment section down below. Before you leave, make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. If you love college football, then this is definitely the place for you. Also, make sure to drop a like on this video as well. It helps out with that YouTube algorithm and helps share the video with more college football fans. Plus, it only takes a second to do. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.